Welcome to the You Are Love Ministry podcast with Pam Baggett and me, Brenda Porch. Pam, I've really enjoyed this study of Jonathan and David. Now, in part one, we've gotten to know Jonathan as a soldier and a leader. And in part two, we saw the beginning of a beautiful friendship. And today we're going to finish the story with a really cool example of what a true friendship really should look like. So, ladies, if you haven't watched part one or part two, you might want to go back and watch those. So, because this is in order and it'll help you understand where we are now. But for right now, Pam, what do you think about these two men that we've been talking about?
I love them. Saul's son Jonathan and David, the man God has chosen to succeed Saul, have both earned admiration and respect from the people of Israel. They each have shown great skills as military leaders and
Mhm.
exceptional personal values.
Yes.
And now they have become friends. But Saul is jealous of the way the people admire David more than they do Saul, and he's determined to get rid of David. Ah, petty people. Okay. First Samuel 19. Now Saul spoke to Jonathan his son and to all his servants that they should kill David. But Saul's son, delighted greatly in David.
Mhm.
So Jonathan told David, saying, My father Saul seeks to kill you. Therefore, please be on your guard until morning, and stay in a secret place and hide. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak with my father about you. Then what I observe, I'll tell you. Thus Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father, and said to him, Let not the king sin against his servant, against David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his works have been very good toward you. For he took his life in his hands and killed the Philistine, and the Lord brought about a great deliverance for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against innocent blood to kill David without a cause? So Saul heeded the voice of Jonathan, and Saul swore, As the Lord lives, he shall not be killed. Then Jonathan called David, and Jonathan told him all these things. So Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as in times past.
Sometimes I look at Saul and I read what he's done and said, and I think that man has some major problems. But I admire Jonathan for being able to go to his dad and say, Look, Dad, you can't kill a man that's done nothing wrong. He's done nothing to deserve this. And for that moment, Saul was willing to listen to reason and to logic. But as we know, that probably won't last long. But I think it's a beautiful example of friendship because Jonathan was willing to risk his relationship with his dad, maybe even his own safety, because we know that dad's already all ordered him to be killed. We talked about that in a previous uh, podcast because he ate honey and dad had said nobody was supposed to eat. So, I just think that Jonathan is a really stand-up guy. I appreciate the fact that he's doing that. And he's talked to dad. Dad said, must have said, okay. So then Jonathan goes to get David. Now, I put myself in David's shoes and I think, would I really want to go back to work with a man that's already thrown a spear at me a couple of times and has openly said he wants me dead? And, um, you know, he, it's probably going to happen again. But David knew that he was going to be king one day.
Right.
Um, and David was going to follow God. So he wasn't going to do anything that was against God. And that really speaks highly of David. So we have these two remarkable godly men who have formed a friendship. And so now we're going to see what happens next. Verse 8. And there was war again, and David went out and fought with the Philistines and struck them with a mighty blow, and they fled from him. Now the distressing spirit from the Lord came upon Saul. Excuse me. And he sat in his house with a spear in his hand, and David was playing music with his hand. Then Saul sought to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he slipped away from Saul's presence, and he drove the spear into the wall. So David fled and escaped that night. Yikes. Pam.
For just a minute, it looked like the problems between Saul and David were worked out. David was winning battles and playing music to ease Saul's tension as he used to do, but it isn't working anymore. Saul throws his spear at him. David escaped and has to accept the fact that the king is determined to kill him, no matter what he says to Jonathan. He's
Can you
it,
imagine sitting there playing the harp and you're kind of looking over at the king and he's just got this spear in his hand and he's just, and any minute because it's happened before. So
Mhm,
that's probably why David could escape is that he was aware that this might happen.
probably true.
Yikes.
You know,
There are
I don't.
times in life when things are just not fair. And I'm sorry, but this really feels like one of them.
Mhm,
But we have to remember that Saul, he went right in the head. He was mentally, God was giving him a troubled spirit. He's moody, he's irrational. And I don't understand why God would put a troubled spirit on him. What do you help? Explain this to me.
calm down. It's okay. Saul, Saul made all his decisions to disobey God without mention of a spirit causing him to do it.
True,
God did not make him do what he did.
true,
The punishment God gave him of losing the kingdom was not done to a man who couldn't help what he was doing.
right.
He was able to do better. I wonder if the spirit from God is more a spirit that God permitted to reach Saul. God has done what he does anytime his people pull away from him and stop following his ways, he withdraws blessings and protection from them. Saul refuses to follow God, so he no longer has the right to expect God's help if he's not going to follow God too. It's just not natural. Well, let's keep
Uh-huh.
going and see what's going on
Okay.
next. Starting in verse 11, Saul also sent messengers to David's house to watch him and to kill him in the morning. And Michal, David's wife, told him, saying, if you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed. So Michal let David down through a window, and he went and fled and escaped. And Michal took on an image and laid it in the bed, put a cover of goat's hair for its head, and covered it with clothes. So when Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, he's sick. Then Saul sent the messengers back to see David, saying, bring him up to me in the bed that I may kill him. And when the messengers had come in, there was the image in the bed with a cover of goat's hair for its head. Then Saul said to Michal, why have you deceived me like this and sent my enemy away so that he has escaped? And Michal answered Saul, he said to me, let me go. Why should I kill you?
Oh my lids. I can just see this. In our day we'd say she put a mannequin in
Mm,
there, but maybe rolled up stuff and little goat hair on the top. But what gets me is Saul says, not that, oh, he's sick, I'll come to him, or oh, he's sick, we'll do it
bring
later.
the bed.
But bring the bed with the sick guy to me so I can kill him.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not even trying to hide his
Oh,
intention
not even a little. No.
from anybody. And then he gets mad at his daughter because she's protecting David. I mean,
Well, look at this is another of Saul's children who's taking David's side.
true.
Michal is Saul's daughter and Jonathan's sister and David's wife.
Hmm.
She protects her husband by pulling a stunt that is a cliche these days. I mean, teens putting things under the bed covers to make parents think they are sleeping while I sneak out. When Daddy Saul complains to her, she claims that David threatened her. She's
Hmm.
lying to one king to protect another one. And meanwhile, David has run to his friend. And this story is going to get exciting now because these two friends are trying to figure out what to do about Saul.
This is a mess. I mean, all right, let's see what happens. I'm just gonna keep reading because I don't know what I would do in their position. 1 Samuel 20 says, then David fled from Naioth
Yeah, sounds
in,
fun.
In Ramah and went and said to Jonathan, what have I done? What is my iniquity and what is my sin before your father that he seeks my life? That's a fair question.
It really is.
That's a fair question. So Jonathan said to him, verse 2, Jonathan said to him, by no means, you shall not die. Indeed, my father will do nothing either great or small without first telling me. And why should my father hide this thing from me? It is not so. Then David took an oath again and said, your father certainly knows that I have found favor in your eyes. And he has said, do not let Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, there is but a step between me and death. So Jonathan said to David, whatever you desire, I will do it for you. Now, look at this conversation that these two men have had. Jonathan is, in my opinion, naive, thinking that, oh, dad won't do anything without my consent. And David's like, yes, he will. He's already said to these people, don't tell him anything because I don't want him to be grieved. Now, that was not what I don't think what Saul was thinking. He was more concerned about David and Jonathan's friendship, my opinion, at that point. But Jonathan is having his eyes open to the fact that he can't trust his dad either. And this statement that David made kind of touches me. But there is a step between me and death. What David is saying here is, I am literally inches away from being killed. And so Jonathan just says, whatever you want to do, I'll do it for you. Just tell me what to do. And I think this is, again, a beautiful example of this friendship. They know Saul can't be trusted. And it's a very awkward situation. So let's see what happens next.
But yeah, I want to deal with poor Jonathan at this point. He's got a mixture of feelings that he's going to deal with and realities that he has to face. And they're all hard.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe his relationship with his father was sweet when he was growing up. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
everything was fine. Maybe Saul got crazy just going when Jonathan was already grown. But it's some way Jonathan still loves his father.
Yes.
I don't think he would keep defending him, especially after dad's come after him and everything else. There's been no limits to what he'd do.
Mm-hmm.
But he needs to believe that this is not a crazy man. He needs to believe that this person he cared about isn't what he seems to be. He's
Mm-hmm.
trying his best to believe something other than what he's seeing. And David's saying, okay, but I'm the one I'm scared. I know
Mm-hmm.
what's going on, and I don't understand how to change him either because we're doing everything right. And yet he's still trying this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm scared, and he will hurt me, and you know it. Excuse me, a little sneeze there. Had to do something, sorry folks, but in the middle of everything, it does happen. Okay. But we got Jonathan just struggling to think, okay, I love David. I want him safe, but I love my dad, and I want not to believe he's as crazy nuts as he is.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be able to believe in that it's all can be resolved. And now he's realizing David's making him see finally he's trying to come straight out. And David's been kind and patient with Jonathan. But now he said, this is the point we're at. I'm going to die if
Mm-hmm.
we don't do something because he's not okay. It's not going to be all right.
And
So
what
now,
Jonathan needs to realize too is that his dad has already ordered for him to be killed once.
right.
What's going to make him think that his dad is not going to order him to be killed again? The people stood up for him last time, but they may not fully understand the situation this time. Of course, we know that didn't happen, but I'm saying it could have because of who Saul was. And they say, what do you predict somebody what they'll do in the future by what they've done in the past?
Yeah.
And Saul has already shown himself to be very willing to say that his son needs to die.
But human beings, we fight hard to believe what we want to believe.
Yes.
We fight hard against facts if it's going to challenge something that's important to our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And we're good at it. It's amazing how powerful our brains can be at messing us up.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't want to see that someone we care about is not worthy of our love.
Yes.
Or not safe or not right. It's like when a person has an illness like Alzheimer's or something, at the beginnings of it, it'll do anything to believe it's not really happening,
Yeah.
that it's not really what's going on.
Yeah.
Until finally we just have to say, okay, there's no way to avoid it now. But it will fight past truth and obvious evidences.
Mm.
All right, well, it's time for the two friends to prepare for the worst case. Let's go to verse 5. And David said to Jonathan, indeed, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king to eat. But let me go, that I may hide in the field until the third day at evening. If your father misses me at all, then say, David earnestly asked permission of me that he might run over to Bethlehem, his city, for there is a yearly sacrifice there. All the family. I know, I got my tongue in front of my eye teeth. I couldn't see what I was saying. Okay. If he says thus, it is well, your servant will be safe. But if he is very angry, be sure that evil is determined by him. Okay, these two are trying so hard to believe that Saul isn't going to try to kill David.
Hmm.
They want to trust him despite everything he's done and said. And the way Saul goes back and forth isn't making it easier for them. His
No.
behavior could be diagnosed these days as what used to be called multiple personality disorder. Either way, they're trying to give him every benefit of the doubt, even when there seems to be no doubt. Jonathan tells David that if he can be certain his father intended evil against David, he will tell him. But meeting each other to talk about it is becoming dangerous. So Jonathan comes up with a plan. First, he's going to talk to his father, and then he will get word to David about what he learns. Before he tells David the plan, he asks David to make a covenant with him. Sabrina, would you start reading in verse 13?
Sure. Verse 13, but if it pleases my father to do you evil, then I will report it to you and send you away that you may go in safety. And if the Lord be with you as he has been with my father, and you shall not only show me the kindness of the Lord while I still live, that I may not die, but you shall not cut off your kindness from my house forever. No, not when the Lord has cut off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth. So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, let the Lord require it at the hand of David's enemies. Now Jonathan again caused David to vow because he loved him, for he loved him as his own soul. Jonathan's a wise man. So what he's saying here to David is, all right, I'm going to protect you. But when you come in power and all your enemies are gone and you have full control over everything, be kind to me, not just to me, but to my entire household. That's very smart. Jonathan knows how the system works in that day and time. And David could take out his vengeance about Saul's actions on Jonathan's entire household. But Jonathan's saying, I don't want you to do that.
You know, long ago, I told a couple of my friends that they were heart friends.
Mm,
My way of describing people that I would hold close to me no matter how much time passed without being together.
yes.
David and Jonathan were that kind of friends. And what Jonathan asked is going to be significant a little later in our story. He wanted the vow to go beyond death.
Yes.
It said, but you shall not cut off your kindness from my house forever. And I also think it's interesting that their vow, their covenant that they made, didn't have David making the same promise, asking for the same promise from Jonathan.
Hmm.
I kind of have this sense that they both knew that ultimately David was going to be the one surviving. They may not
Well,
have
they
known.
at least knew that David was going to be the king. I
Yeah,
mean,
they
they
did
may
know.
not have known that Jonathan wouldn't survive, but after Saul was gone, David was king. I don't know why Jonathan would think that David wouldn't show him kindness after everything that Jonathan has done. But I guess there might have been that little bit of doubt in his head. And he was just covering all his bases, making sure.
Either way, I think it's an interesting thing and sweet.
You're
Okay,
right.
let's read their plan starting in verse 18.
Okay.
Then Jonathan said to David, tomorrow's the new moon, and you will be missed because your seat will be empty. And when you have stayed 3 days, and the feast would go on that long, go down quickly and come to the place where you hid on the day of the deed. Remain by the stone easel, and then I will shoot 3 arrows to the side as though I shot at a target.
Mm.
There I will send a lad, saying, go find the arrows. If I expressly say to the lad, look, the arrows are on this side of you, get them and come, then as the Lord lives, there is safety for you and no harm. But if I say thus to the young man, look, the arrows are beyond you, go your way, for the Lord has sent you away. And as for the matter which you and I have spoken of, indeed, the Lord be between you and me forever.
I don't know about you, but I kind of find this interesting because their friendship was very strong. But David had to have a lot of trust in Jonathan as well, because Jonathan could have said, the arrows are on this side, and David could have come back and it not gone well. And so David was really trusting Jonathan to understand where his dad's head was at that moment and to
True.
give him sound advice. And so I think that also speaks to this close bond and friendship. But these guys, they had a big problem. And the problem's name was Saul. All right, so Jonathan goes to the feast at Saul's house. And he makes excuses for, now I'm the one doing it, for David's absence. And this is what happened then. Verse 30. Then Saul's anger was aroused against Jonathan. He said to him, "You son of a perverse, rebellious woman." That wasn't very nice of him to say to his son, was it?
It's worse. Yeah.
Do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, you shall not be established, nor your kingdom. Now therefore send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die. Verse 32. And Jonathan answered Saul his father and said to him, "Why should he be killed? What has he done?" Then Saul cast his spear at him to kill him, by which Jonathan knew that it was determined by his father to kill David. So Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger and ate no food the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David because his father had treated him shamefully. Wait. Let's back this truck up. So Jonathan is telling Dad that David's not there and he's gone to do a sacrifice or whatever. Dad gets mad and says really ugly things to his own son. And then, am I reading that right? That Saul in verse 33 casts a spear at Jonathan? This is what we've been talking about.
Man's crazy.
Yeah. Well, he is so determined. Of course, I'm thinking Saul, if you kill him off, then he can't become king and all that stuff you just talked about with him losing his house and everything. That's not going to happen either. But at that point, there is no doubt in Jonathan's mind that his father is completely obsessed with killing David to the point that he would even kill Jonathan because Jonathan is standing with David. So Jonathan gets up, he leaves, he's not going to eat. But he's right. I mean, if David becomes king, Jonathan can't become king. But Jonathan doesn't seem to care about any of that. He just cares about David and doing what is right. And that is a very powerful message. He's not power hungry like his dad. He's an honorable man. And he has every right to be angry. First, Dad is ugly to him. Then he tries to kill him. He gets up and he walks out.
So there. Well, that didn't go very well.
No, that's putting it mildly.
I'm trying to, but there is no doubting how serious the situation is now. It's time to talk to David. So going on to verse 35. And so it was in the morning that Jonathan went out into the field at the time appointed with David, and the little lad was with him. Then he said to his lad, "Now run, find the arrows which I shoot." As the lad ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. When the lad had come to the place where the arrow was, which Jonathan had shot, Jonathan cried out after the lad and said, "Is not the arrow beyond you?" And Jonathan cried out after the lad, "Make haste, hurry, do not delay." So Jonathan's lad gathered up the arrows and came back to his master. But the lad did not know anything. Only Jonathan and David knew of the matter. Then Jonathan gave his weapons to his lad and said to him, "Go carry them to the city." As soon as the lad had gone, David arose from a place toward the south, fell on his face to the ground, and bowed down 3 times. And they kissed one another, and they wept together, but David more so. Then Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, since we have both sworn in the name of the Lord, saying, 'May the Lord be between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever.'" So he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city.
Now, you talked a minute ago about Jonathan not requiring David to make the same oath, but they've made some kind of an agreement.
Yeah, it's phrased a little differently at that point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This makes my heart hurt, because these two wanted to be friends. They wanted to be together, but now it's to the point Jonathan can't even have any hope that his dad is going to do the right thing. And so this is such a painful goodbye. And I feel sorry for them because I keep thinking things could have been different. And David could have taken over as king, and I would think that he would make Jonathan a very important part of his leadership,
Mhm.
because they had a special bond and they trusted each other and they were doing the right thing. But that's not going to happen. So if only Saul had been the man that he was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to read the last time that David and Jonathan were together, but their story isn't over just yet. In chapter 23, verse 16, then Jonathan, Saul's son, arose and went to David in the woods and strengthened his hand in God. And he said to him, do not fear, for the hand of Saul, my father, shall not find you. You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next to you. That was Jonathan's desire.
Mhm.
Even my father Saul knows that. So the two of them made a covenant before the Lord, and David stayed in the woods, and Jonathan went to his own house. Then we move on to chapter 31, and this makes me really sad. I mean, Jonathan just said, we're going to do this together, but that's not what's going to happen. In chapter 31, we read, now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell slain on Mount Gilboa. Then the Philistines followed hard after Saul and his sons, and the Philistines killed Jonathan, Abinadab, a name I can't say.
Shishwa, something like that.
Yeah, what she said, Saul's son. So Saul had three of his sons with him, and they killed Jonathan. This is just sad. I mean, you just have to feel for Jonathan. He was trying to do the right thing, and it's not the worst part of the story. Okay, so Pam, you get to do the rest.
Well, I will, but I was thinking too, we were talking a minute ago about Jonathan expecting to be by David's side in the game. These two men had all of the elements for the most perfect friendship.
Mhm.
They were very balanced in terms of their skills and their values. And they were strong men, and they were strong in loving as much as they were in war. They would have been an amazing long-term partnership, friendship, raising their families together.
Mhm.
I could just see so many ways the two of them would have blessed each other's lives. But you're right. Now the sad part comes. A messenger comes to David. Now we're in 2 Samuel chapter 1, verse 3. And David said to him, where have you come from? So he said to him, I've escaped from the camp of Israel. Then David said to him, how did the matter go? Please tell me. And he answered, the people have fled from the battle. Many of the people are fallen and dead. And Saul and Jonathan, his son, are dead also. David mourned deeply for both Saul and Jonathan, and he made the people learn the song of the bow, a song in their memory, praising both of them. One line stands out because, excuse me, because it's quoted in our literature today. In verse 25, we read, how the mighty have fallen in the midst of the battle. The song also talks about David's deep love for his friend.
I mean, all for the sin and the craziness of one man. Look at the suffering. Look at the suffering that has been caused. Now we got to remember that Jonathan and David had a pact. Jonathan is gone. He's dead. But we know David's character enough that we know that he's gonna honor that pact. And it said, the pact was, but you shall not cut off your kindness from my house forever. And David didn't forget that promise. We read that in 2 Samuel 4:4. Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son who was lame in his feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel, and his nurse took him up and fled. And it happened, as she made haste to flee, that he fell and became lame. His name was Mephibosheth.
Oh, now see, you're supposed to have practiced
I
this.
did practice it. Mephibosheth.
Fib. Get a fib in there. Yeah, Mephibosheth.
Mephibosheth.
Thank you. There you go.
All right. So after David became king, he kept that promise. He brought the son,
Jonathan's son. Yeah.
the son, to not just live with him. And he could have put him in a little corner somewhere, but he said, no, Jonathan's son is going to eat at my table. And so David honored the promise that they had made to each other. And we are not surprised by that. At least I'm not, because we know David's character. I had no doubt that he was going to keep that promise. And, in that day and age, to be lame was a big deal. And so these were the people that were outcasts. So this lame person needed David's help more than anybody else, because he really couldn't take care of himself. And David was true to his word. I just, Saul, Saul, Saul.
One man's sin can mess up everybody's lives. Yeah.
Yes, yes, they sure can. All right, so let's look at what we can learn, because I always like to do that. These are not just wonderful Bible stories and inspiring men to follow their lead, but I want to apply it a little bit deeper to myself. Men can have deep friendships. Most of the time when we think of a close friendship, we think of women. But when the Bible talks about them crying together, kissing each other, weeping together, all of that, I think of the men in that part of the world. They are very passionate and demonstrative with their emotions. And so that would not have been that unusual for a man to show those kind of emotions. Now, here in the U.S., most men are not that expressive with their emotions, but it would have been normal for them to do that kind of thing. The Bible talks about them weeping and tearing their clothes and this kind of stuff. So this was a very passionate society.
Mhm.
And so, whereas here in the US, we might think that seemed a little unusual, for that part of the world, it really wasn't. And so I think it's really important for us to remember that men can have deep friendships, and they need deep friendships. These men needed each other. And I just hated that they didn't get to do more. And, a lot of times we'll chastise or fuss at our boys if they cry or they show some kind of emotion. And now we know that that's detrimental. That's not good for them. We need to allow our boys to have emotion. We need to allow our men have an emotion. I love somebody had a shirt that said, "Real men cry."
I like it.
And
Yeah.
I think that's great. All right.
think-
Do you have any comment on that one?
I was thinking of the image of men and their friendships, and it's like thinking of soldiers who have to battle together
Mm-hmm.
and be out in dangerous territory for long periods of time and in danger all the time, but they develop friendships that last their lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And they're passionate about it, and they don't mind showing their emotions to that person. He's more than a brother. So I think that we got to understand that when men have every right to have that depth of emotion in their friendships.
Oh, yeah.
If they don't, actually, this has been proven that people that don't cry and express emotions have more physical health problems. There's a lot of reasons that it should be allowed to do that.
I like it. I agree. You're completely right. All right. The next thing I saw is that sometimes you must take a stand for what is right. When Jonathan, as you said, he kept defending his dad, he kept thinking that things were going to be okay. But there came a point in time when dear old dad is using really ugly language to Saul, I mean, to Jonathan, and then tries to kill him, that was all it was going to be. What is the saying? Believe people when they show you who they are.
Mm.
And he, as you were talking about earlier, he didn't want to believe it. He didn't want to see it. But Saul was consistent in who he was. And so then at that point, Jonathan had to make a decision. Am I going to stand with blood? Because, they say blood's thicker than water. Am I going to stand with my dad and keep my relationship with him and maybe one day be king? Or am I going to do what's right and help my friend? Because he's innocent. He did nothing to deserve my father's wrath. And Jonathan chose the right thing. He chose to do right. And sometimes we're put in those very difficult situations where you literally have to walk away from someone very close to you in your life. The Bible talks about Jesus coming to separate mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters. And, we may have to choose our family over the Lord. Jonathan had to walk away from his dad to do what was right. in the sight of God. And some of us may have to do that as well. It's hard, unfortunately, but it may be necessary. All right. Then the last thing I saw is that when you truly love someone, you want to do what's best for them. You know, Jonathan wanted David to stay with him. He kept trying to make that work, but it couldn't. And so Jonathan made the difficult call to tell David, you got to go, and let him go. And it was hard, and they cried and they made vows, but it had to be done. And sometimes we need to make those kinds of sacrifices for people that we love. It's hard. All right. Well, that's all I got, girl. You got anything?
I just always get a little sentimental when I think of these two men, especially Jonathan. I'm just one of my favorite people in the Bible.
You know, I don't know that we're going to know each other in heaven, but if we did, can you imagine that reunion
Oh, that would have been sweet. Yes.
between those two friends? So, all right, ladies. Well, that's all we have for today. We hope that you will come back and join us for the next podcast, because we have lots of Bible to study, and Pam and I love studying it together and sharing that with you. And we hope that you'll come back. We hope you'll tell your female friends about it and let them tune in and watch as well. So just know that you are loved.